All right, we're going to talk a little Texas A&M as they travel to the Swamp for a big game this weekend. Carter from Aggies 247. How you doing, man?
Doing great, TJ. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, been a little bit. I know that you've kind of bounced around and moved around, but selling at A&M, and I've enjoyed still following you and excited for this game this weekend. Are you coming back to Florida? Do you make your grand return?
I am. I'll be at Disney World on Friday,
Nice.
so very excited for that. But yeah, when I covered FSU, I think they came to Tallahassee for that game. So haven't been to Gainesville. I actually went 7 years ago when A&M played there at Florida, back when I was a student at A&M. So I've been there before, but it's been a while, and so we'll be back. Good, will be good to be back in Florida for sure.
Should be fun. Should be a fun game, a game that means a lot for both teams based on how the season has started. Let's start there, and then we'll talk about the game specifically. Maybe felt okay about week one. Played Notre Dame close. It didn't get it done, but you're thinking, oh, Notre Dame's a really good team. We hung with them, and then Notre Dame comes out and lays an egg against Boise State, and you're like, oh, this is Florida State did the same thing. We're like, oh well, Georgia Tech's a good team, and then they come lose to Syracuse, and you're like, maybe my expectations weren't quite right with that week one loss. So, just thoughts from the A&M fan base on just kind of where they are right now, what the thoughts are through two games. They obviously look better, but McNeese State last week, I don't know how much is taken away from there. So, just where is the fan base right now?
Yeah, I think there was some disappointment with the Notre Dame game. You could excuse it because you thought at the time, well, Notre Dame very well could be 12-0 by the end of the season and could be a top five team in the country, all told. But it was in Northern Illinois. You kind of look back on that game and you say, man, you look back at all the missed opportunities from that game. I mean, starting with the first drive, they had 3rd and 3 at the 17, overthrew a pass, running back drops it, probably would have been a 17-yard touchdown, had to settle for a field goal. There were like 12 of those things that happened in that game. So a lot of wasted opportunities, and I feel like they thought that that was a winnable game. Going forward, yeah, I can't take a ton from McNeese State. I think the positive you could take was, hey, Connor Wigman went from being the worst quarterback in the country week one to being pretty good in week two. And so I think this Florida game is going to answer a lot of questions with this team where it's such a small sample size from two games, and one of the games, being against essentially a high school team, right? And so a lot of questions that need to be answered, beginning with Hunter Wigman not playing well against Notre Dame, playing well against McNeese State. What version are you going to see? A&M seems to think that, hey, kind of an anomaly what happened against Notre Dame. A lot of it was rustiness coming off the injury and not having a full healthy spring, and had some happy feet, had some footwork issues that, hey, once he fixed those, he could be like himself again. And those weren't issues that showed up before his injury. So they feel like that, he'll be able to prove that that was sort of a fluke, but we'll only learn that once we see him against some real competition beginning this weekend.
If there was an SEC defense that you would maybe want to go up against when you had been struggling, I don't know how closely you kind of keep your eye on Florida at all times, like we do, just because of what we cover and where we are. If there was an SEC defense that you wanted to go up against, it might be UFs. I know there are others in there too that aren't super strong. But because of that, do you think that they'll, UF secondary didn't look very good against Cam Ward. Now I know that Connor and Cam Ward are two different quarterbacks, and so I'm not trying to make that comparison. But they couldn't stop the run, they couldn't stop the pass, they didn't really tackle well. How do you think Texas A&M will look to attack this UF defense primarily?
Well, I think this A&M offense is still kind of figuring it out. It's not going to be the strong point of this team. If you ask what the strong point was, it'd be the defensive line, and maybe with how the secondary has looked so far, it'd be them. Maybe running the football. I feel like they've really found something in Le'Veon Moss. He's not going to break off 30-yard run after 30-yard run, but really does a great job of fighting for extra contact, forcing his way through tackles, and falling forward for those extra couple yards. He can really punish a defense by just 5-yard gain, 5-yard gain, 5-yard gain. And so I think that could be part of it. I do think A&M will try to get its passing attack going. It's just it hasn't. We saw it get going against McNeese State, but it wasn't really their focus. They were running the ball early and often to set up the pass. I think that's going to be more what you see from this team. The receivers are a weak point for Texas A&M. So, can they get a Cyrus Allen going? Can they get Noah Thomas going? Certainly that'll be part of it. But I think it begins with that running game, getting Le'Veon Moss going. I think you'll see a mix of Amari Daniels in there as well. He had a nice performance against McNeese State. So I think they'll go heavy on the run, and that'll set up the passing game for them.
So when you look at the other side, obviously there's the controversy. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but it's probably the closest word that we can think of Lagway and Mertz, and obviously kind of a tough situation for Napier to struggle in game one with your starter. Your backup comes in and he's this 5-star phenom and kills a terrible team who is like really bad on the FCS level too. But it makes the fan base say we're gonna vote you out if you don't start him going forward. I expect Mertz to start. That just seems like what Napier has hinted at. I don't think that's out of the. I guess it's not out of the realm of possibilities for that not to be the case. But it seems like it'll be Mertz. But how do you think they're preparing for that combo of Lagway Mertz? Like has Elko talked about that, or how do you think that kind of goes down?
Yeah, Elko's talked about it, and he's kind of said, hey, you don't want to have paralysis by analysis. You don't want to throw so much at your defense that they can't handle either quarterback. Stick to the same game plan for the most part with both. And, the one thing he pointed out was yes, the quarterback will be different in skill set, but the other 10 players on offense are all going to be the same regardless. So you can game plan around all the other guys and it'd be kind of similar. So it sounds like there's not going to be two very different ways they try to defend Florida, depending on who the quarterback is. Certainly, you got to know the strengths and weaknesses of both. And I know for A&M, they have a lot of familiarity with DJ Lagway. They tried to flip him last second when Mike Elko was hired. Wasn't successful. He's a Texas product, pretty close to College Station. So they have that familiarity there, and I don't think he's somebody that they just don't have any tape on and don't really know what his strengths and weaknesses are. So I think they'll try to keep it similar with both to kind of keep it simple for their defense.
Yeah, Lagway more mobile than Mertz most likely, but this isn't like people compare it to Tebow and Leak, and they're not that different, right? Like it's not like two completely different games that you have to play. Maybe side note, what would you do if you're Napier? How would you play this?
Well, my thought is I don't like using two quarterbacks. And honestly, he's in a tough spot because, you're only going with Mertz if you're him, if you feel like he gives you the best chance to win. It seems like maybe he's thinking that, hey, I don't care about 2 or 3 years from now because if I don't win now – I won't be here 2-3 years from now. So I think him going with Mertz tells me that he feels like he's the better option, and throwing Lagway in there is kind of the way to appease the fan base. I'm not, my boots aren't on the ground, so I couldn't tell you is Lagway definitively better right now than Mertz? If you ask any Florida fan, they'll tell you, hey, yes, he's the chosen one. He's the future. He's the present and the future. And so what I would do, I don't really know. I'd probably just go with Lagway because he gives you the highest ceiling. He gives you the best chance at having the big play. And Graham Mertz, he's serviceable, but he's not great. Puts up decent stats, but they're kind of empty stats. Doesn't win a lot of big games. So why not go for the guy that will not just help you now, but later, and gives you that ceiling where he can be that game changer and make those crazy throws down the field. So I'd stick with Lagway, just go with him, and I think that's what a lot of Florida fans feel like as well.
Yeah, it's certainly what they want. I don't necessarily think it's going to be what they get on Saturday. I think he goes the other way. But you talked about Texas A&M's defensive front. We'll wrap up here in a moment. But you talked about their front being really good. UF's offensive line, not very good so far. Is that where you feel like A&M has the biggest advantage in this game? Is that matchup of the trenches on both sides?
It should be. The problem for A&M so far, though, has been they only have one sack through two games, and it's kind of been the big surprise
Yeah.
of, hey, you brought in the Nick Scorton, the Purdue transfer who led the Big Ten in sacks last year. You brought back Shamar Turner, who had 6 sacks, was second team All SEC last year. Cassius Howell led the MAC in sacks. You have a lot of guys that have proven production on this defense, and they yet haven't put it together. Now, they have 20 pressures on the season. They're getting to the quarterback. They had 2 pressures last game that led to 2 interceptions. So they can get to the quarterback. They just aren't quite finishing. And so I think maybe this is the game where they're kind of due, where it's like, hey, maybe they have 4 sacks, 5 sacks, because they're due for it, right? It just seems like how the game works sometimes. But I also think the secondary can be a real asset for this team. They haven't given up a lot of deep plays. They play a lot of too high. They're kind of bend don't break a little bit, where they're not going to give up a bunch of big plays down the field. And when you have a pass rush that can get to the quarterback, even when they're not sacking him, they can affect throws. They can bat down passes, and you could force some turnovers there. So I think that's where A&M's strength will be defensively. Their weakness, I mentioned the pass rush, but also run defense has been an issue for them so far. Missed 17 tackles against the run against Notre Dame. You also have given up quite a few big plays. Only 7 teams in the country have given up more rushing plays of 20-plus yards. So, can they tighten that down against an experienced back like Montrell Johnson? I know he had the big run against Miami, so limiting those big plays, I think, will be a big key for this defense.
So I was going to ask you next, we talked a lot about what A&M, will do well, what you expect them to do well, what you kind of concerned about. And I don't know if the answer is the run defense, but I was going to ask, my next question was going to be, what worries you the most about UF? Whether, so if it's the run defense, what's maybe number 2? What worries you the most if you're an Aggie fan in this game?
Well, first of all, 10-game road losing streak for the Aggies, dating back to the 2021 season. Last time they won a road game, Mike Elko was their defensive coordinator. So can you finally get that evasive win in a road environment where, Connor Wigman, if you look through his career, not only has he not played a lot of good defense, it's not saying that Florida's good defensively, but they're an SEC defense. Not only has he not played a lot of those, but he hasn't played in a lot of big road environments. Miami, you and I both know that's not a really challenging road environment. We asked Connor Wigman, what was the most challenging road environment? He said South Carolina.
Yeah.
South Carolina Sandstorm is pretty cool, but I wouldn't rank them up there like I would with the Swamp. So, that will be a challenge with helmet communicators and silent counts. How do you handle that? You've got a center that's began the year as the backup and had to fill in for the starter who suffered a season-ending injury in Mark Naboo. So, snapping the ball, getting your plays in, not having illegal procedures. Those are kind of things that you have to deal with on the road. And then maybe just the second part is DJ Lagway, right? Like, we saw him light up Sanford, but it's Sanford. But what if he comes out and he's just the next amazing thing? I mean, number 1 quarterback in the country in the 24 class. A&M faced a guy named Trevor Lawrence when he was a true freshman. He actually came in, replaced the starter, and he lit A&M up and was the reason why Clemson won that game back in 2018. And I'm not saying Lagway is going to be Trevor Lawrence, but the number 1 quarterback in the country, and in his first start threw for 450 yards. What happens if he comes in and he's just the truth immediately? I think that would be kind of the worry for A&M.
Yeah. Do you have right now, I believe A&M's about a 4.5 point favorite. Do you have a lean on this? Have you made a prediction yet? Will you make one soon?
I haven't made it yet. I'll have it on our site tomorrow. I think A&M wins this game. The only qualifier is, again, if Lagway is the next Trevor Lawrence, okay, not much you can do there. But predicting this as if Mertz is mostly the guy and they kind of sprinkle in Lagway, just think A&M's the better team, and this is the game that they should win. You look at Florida, probably going to end up being below 500 for yet again under Billy Napier, and you kind of rank the teams on A&M's schedule. Florida could be like sixth or seventh toughest, and so after losing the Notre Dame game, I think this is a must-win for this team if they have any sort of ambitions to have a strong season. So I think the sense of urgency will be high for them. I think they have the key advantages when it comes to their defense and their running game. And so I think, do they win by multiple scores? I don't know, but I think they could probably win an uglier, low-scoring game as long as Lagway's not lighting it up.
Yeah, I like it. I tend to agree. I think the just looking at the path to an A&M victory is a little easier to see than the UF one. I think UF needs some breaks to go their way. Maybe the swamp be the swamp, which it wasn't week one. I was in Gainesville for it, but yeah, if some things break their way, they can certainly win. But it seems like if both teams go out and play about as well as you expect, then it feels like an A&M win. But I suppose that is why we play the game. So Carter, where can folks find you and follow more of your work?
Bigum247.com and at Carter Karels on Twitter. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us, man. We appreciate it a ton, and good luck. Have a good trip.
Awesome, man. Great seeing you.
You too, buddy.